Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. Fall just started a few days ago, and if you're anything like me, you've probably just barely noticed temperatures dropping. But winter is just a few months away, and now's the best time to start preparing for it. Many important winter preps are starting to show up on store shelves, and they'll probably sit there collecting dust for a little while. But when the first winter storm blows through, those are going to disappear quickly, some even within a few hours of news hitting. So because of that, it makes sense to go ahead and pick up the most essential items now before anybody else even starts to think about it. One of the most important things to take care of before this winter is to come up with ways to keep your home warm. Because if temperatures hit extreme lows, it is possible to freeze to death or suffer from hypothermia even within your own home. One of the easiest ways to do this is to pick up a propane space heater like this one. And those portable heaters come in a few different sizes. The one that I have works well if you need to heat something like a small room, although you can heat larger spaces using the next size up, the Big Buddy. And I like those because they're fairly safe to use indoors. Like, they have tip over protection. They also have a low oxygen sensor which will turn the unit off if oxygen levels drop too low, and that usually coincides with a buildup of something like carbon monoxide. So they're pretty good for indoor use, and also you can use them with both 1-pound propane bottles and 20-pound cylinders. But if you're going to use it with a 20-pound propane cylinder, just a couple of things to keep in mind are, first of all, you want a filter on that line to prevent the oil from the hose from getting into the heater and messing it up. And then also, when you connect a buddy heater to a propane tank, you want to turn on that tank as slowly as possible, because if you don't, then you can have issues keeping that heater lit when it's hooked up to one of those larger tanks. And even though they won't produce as much heat as one of the heaters I just talked about, oil lamps, hurricane lanterns, and even candles can help heat small areas. And out of those three, I generally prefer hurricane lanterns for a few different reasons. Larger ones like this one will burn fairly bright because they have a larger wick, and they're also safer. Their flame is completely enclosed within a glass globe, and they tend to have fairly wide bases, making them more difficult to knock over. But of course, you still need to exercise good safety practices, like keeping them away from flammable materials, so things like curtains and papers. For candles, the safest way to use those is a candle lantern, like this Yuko Candelier. Like with a hurricane lantern, the flames on those candles are completely enclosed, and also it's not so tall that it's going to be easy to knock over just by bumping into it. Plastic sheeting can also be used to help keep your home warm by sealing up leaky doors and windows, and transparent sheeting has the added benefit of letting light in, so it'll help kind of produce a little greenhouse effect. If you have a fireplace, make sure that it's in good working order before using it, and if it's wood burning, pick up plenty of firewood. And the same goes also if you have like a dedicated wood stove. And while you should do everything that you can to keep the temperature inside of your home at safe levels, it's also a very good idea to go ahead and pick up some high quality winter clothing, and for that, wool is one of your best options. Here I have a wool beanie, balaclava, and pair of gloves, and what makes wool so valuable is that it'll continue to keep you warm even if it's wet. The gloves are actually just a pair of military surplus glove liners that I've had for around 20 years. And you can wear those either just by themselves or with something like the leather work gloves that they're originally designed to be used with, or with mittens like what I do. The beanie and balaclava are made by Minus 33. I haven't had those for very long. I think I've had them for a little bit less than a year now, but the material does seem to hold up well. They do seem to be high quality, although I wish that I'd picked up a slightly thicker beanie. You also want to pick up some good wool socks and a decent pair of winter boots. And when you're picking out boots, look for a pair that is very well insulated and is also waterproof. Then don't overlook the more basic and obvious things like good quality jackets, coats, and things like that. And even though this isn't something that you wear, a Zippo hand warmer is an excellent item to add to your preps. It runs on lighter fluid and can burn for up to 12 hours. These are most commonly used for things like hunting, but they would be very nice to have during a winter power outage as well. It's a prep that I picked up last year, and I was actually really impressed by it. Another thing everyone should do before this winter is make sure that they have a reliable backup power source, and for this you have a few different options. Many people will opt for standby generators that kick on as soon as the power goes out, and those generally do work well for short-term emergencies. The main problem with those, however, is that they rely on natural gas utilities or propane as their fuel source. So that could be a really big issue if we're dealing with a really widespread situation like what happened in Texas a couple years ago, because I believe in some areas natural gas utilities were knocked out as well, or they were very close to being so. And also, if it lasts long enough and maybe you have a big propane tank on your property, you got to consider how long that propane is going to last if you're using it for a lot of different things at once. Traditional gas generators are probably the most common option for home backup power, and these are nice since you can store fuel for them ahead of time and they'll last as long as that supply does. A mid-sized generator like this one will allow you to run a couple of appliances like your fridge and box freezer without burning a ton of gas in the process. And if your natural gas utilities are still up and running and you have a gas furnace, you may even be able to hook that generator up to a transfer switch and power that furnace. However, if you're going to rely on a traditional gas generator, opt for a dual or tri-fuel model that can run on propane or propane and natural gas as well. Also, be sure to store plenty of fuel ahead of time since you don't know how long an event will last or if you'll be able to get to a gas station to resupply. Another thing to consider when using that kind of generator is where are you going to set it up. Those really do need to be located at least 25 feet away from your home to prevent things like accidental fires or carbon monoxide from getting into your home. And also, do not run them under something like an attached carport or a garage, anything like that, because it'll make it very easy for those fumes to find their way into your home. If you already have a gas generator, go ahead and do any necessary maintenance on it and test it to make sure it'll fire up when needed. If you have a generator with an electric start feature, keep a close eye on its battery since those can be major weak points. Solar can be another good option, but you'll need to keep a couple of things in mind. First, winter storms frequently cause heavy cloud cover, sometimes for multiple days at a time, and that would cause big problems for recharging your power station. You also need to understand that running things like electric space heaters uses a lot of power in a very short amount of time, so I would not count on using one of those with a solar generator through the duration of a storm. So if you're going to rely on solar power during a winter storm, try to get the largest model that you can, preferably one with an expandable capacity, get plenty of solar panels, and be very deliberate with what you try to run with it. Another thing you should take care of before this winter, if you haven't done so already, is have multiple ways to cook off-grid. Those can be used for the obvious task of preparing your food, but they can also be used to boil water if your area experiences a boil water notice. Gas grills and propane camp stoves are good options, but you should also have ways to cook indoors as well. Bad weather could make cooking outdoors a challenge, and if a situation lasts long enough or you live in an area that already suffers from high crime, then security could be a concern. Butane stoves are generally speaking safer to use indoors than propane, but butane has one big disadvantage in that it will not work in below freezing temperatures. It will not vaporize at 31 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, so you want to be sure to keep those cans in an area of your home where they're not going to be exposed to very low temperatures. So I would not store them in places like your garage. Also would not store them in cabinets that are along an exterior wall. Alcohol stoves are another good option. The one that I have is just a small backpacking version, but you can find larger ones as well. But the nice thing with these is that you don't even have to buy one. They're pretty easy to make using just a couple of soda cans, and I'll link to a video showing how to do that at the end of this video. Now, if you are able to cook outside, then having a rocket stove would be beneficial if the situation lasts longer than your fuel storage can handle, since they use natural materials like sticks. But it's also important to not overlook the most basic parts of preparedness like food storage. And when considering foods for storage during a winter storm, think about foods that are going to be the easiest to prepare. So that's going to be basically canned goods and things like soup and chili. Those are going to be great because, you know, they're good cold weather comfort foods anyway. And if you do have something like a solar generator, then a 12-volt freezer can be used to preserve important foods like meat or more critical items like medications that need to be refrigerated. Then also have plenty of water stored inside of your home. And the stored inside of your home part is very important because anything left outside or in some place like your garage could freeze up. So if you have that, maybe drain a little bit of water at it to give that ice room to expand so it doesn't blow out your containers. I prefer portable water containers, things like water bricks, aquatainers, military water cans, but it also wouldn't hurt to have some bottled water that you rotate through as well. Also have things like an Aquapod or water bob that you can use to store water at the last moment, like if you know something's on the way, throw one of those in the bathtub, fill it up. Then also be sure you have a good water filter, like that's a Sawyer tap that you can put on the end of a faucet, but then gravity-fed systems are good as well, especially if you're in a situation where you lose running water. Another thing that you should take care of before this winter is protect you and your loved ones from fires and carbon monoxide. Since people are using things like heaters, candles, and camp stoves, house fires increase dramatically. Then to make matters worse, winter storms can make fighting fires more difficult because of things like bad road conditions and water system failures. So because of that, you need to do a good job using your equipment as safely as possible, but also have the means to deal with situations early before they get out of hand. So start by switching out the batteries in your smoke alarms. As a general rule, smoke alarms that use 9-volt batteries should be good for around 6 months, but it still wouldn't hurt to go ahead and check them monthly anyway. Also ensure that you have a good quality battery-powered carbon monoxide alarm. Carbon monoxide is some really nasty stuff. It's killed entire families in their sleep. They never even knew anything was wrong. And what's really bad about it is that it can be produced by anything with an open flame, and those are the kinds of things that people depend on during winter power outages. Also have one or more fire extinguishers, and when it comes to these, the bigger the better, because if a fire does break out, you want to have as much to throw at it as you can. If you already have one or more fire extinguishers, take a look at the gauge on those and make sure that they're still in good working order, and keep them in places that everybody knows where they're at and they're easily accessible. And aside from keeping your family safe, you should also do whatever you can to protect your home. Winter storms can cause all sorts of damage, from things like falling tree limbs, burst pipes, and roof leaks. Having things like tarps on hand can help you reduce the damage that an accident causes. Plywood, dimensional lumber, nails, and screws can help with that as well. Tools like chainsaws can help you get limbs off of your home or other structures, and also have shutoff tools that you can use to turn off your water and gas utilities if needed. Then don't overlook basic winter tools like snow shovels, ice scrapers, and ice melt. And I'm sure if you live up north, you already have those. But if you're somebody like me who lives in an area where that stuff doesn't happen very often, when they do happen every once in a while, it can really take you off guard if you don't have those. But all that being said, it is important to remember that despite our best efforts, sometimes things still just go bad. And in a situation where your home becomes heavily damaged and you can't live there, you want to have an agreement with a neighbor that if that happens, you can stay with them, and if that happens to their home, they can stay with you. But one big thing that many people overlook is preparing their vehicles for the winter months. It seems like every year we have people get stranded on the road and freeze to death in their cars, and that's sad because it's completely preventable and unnecessary. This is a bag that I'm going to put in my truck, and inside I have things like a good wool blanket and a few emergency blankets as backups. I'm also going to keep some cold weather clothing in there as well. And those clothes will help me layer up if temperatures drop, or if for some reason I get wet, I can just change into them. A small candle lantern like this one is also good to have, since it can help raise the temperature inside of your car. Just be sure that if you're using one of those that you crack a window slightly and don't do anything that would cause a fire inside of your car. Then you also want to have things in your vehicle that can be used to prevent you from getting stranded. Cold weather can zap car batteries, so having a battery jump pack along with some jumper cables will help you deal with that. Also, check your spare tire to ensure that it has plenty of air, and if you can afford it, pick up one of those small inflators that runs on the 12-volt port in your car. A folding shovel is also good to have in case you get stuck and have to dig your way out, and it is smart to have some basic survival gear in your vehicle, but just remember that in most cases, sheltering in your car is going to be a better bet than trying to set up camp outside. But when it comes to winter travel, the best way to deal with the situation is avoid getting into one in the first place. So start by winterizing your vehicle so that it'll have the best chance of running reliably in those extreme low temperatures. And also keep an eye out on the news, know what's going on in your area so that you don't drive headlong into a big blizzard or a huge traffic jam. And winter preparedness is a big topic that cannot be covered in just one video. So if you want to see some winter preps that a lot of people forget, then check out this video. Or if you want to see items that'll disappear in a crisis, like before a blizzard, then check out this video. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.